The Kerr-Sulphurets-Mitchell, or KSM project, is proposed for the remote and wild headwaters tributaries of the Nass and Unik river systems. This culturally significant and critical fish-bearing habitat is in a transboundary region of northwest BC and southeast Alaska. Both river systems support large populations of salmon and other fishes. The Nass River is the third largest salmon producer in Canada and supports an annual $10 million commercial salmon fishery, along with the food fish needs of several First Nations and regional communities. This area is also home to large populations of grizzly bears, moose, and mountain goats, which would all be severely impacted by the removal of critical habitat through the development of this project. If built, the KSM project would be one of the largest open-pit copper, gold, silver, molybdenum mines in the world. KSM proposes to process 130,000 tons of ore per day and generate over 2 billion tons of tailings waste over the 55 years of operation. This amount of waste could fill 1,250 baseball stadiums. From the mine's open pit sites, KSM would see 23-kilometer-long twin tunnels excavated through a mountain, transporting crushed ore to the plant site and tailings impoundment within the Belle Irving watershed, which is located between Teagan and Treaty Creeks, a subbasin of the Nass watershed. 40 trucks per day would transport processed ore from the plant site via Highway 37 to Stewart, en route to Asian refineries. At the mine site in the Unik River watershed, waste rock generated would need to be stored over the life of the mine in 2 rock storage facilities. Additionally, a water storage facility and dam would be built to contain the contaminated water flowing out of the rock storage facilities. As this lake fills, the water would be released into Sulphurets Creek, a tributary of the Unik River, located upstream of Misty Fjords National Park in Alaska. At the plant site, the headwaters of Teagan and Treaty Creeks would be turned into a tailings management facility, or a tailings lake, which would be 8 kilometers long by 2 kilometers wide. The tailings lake would be created through the construction of 2 earthen dams, both at a height unprecedented in Canada, as high and much wider than the Hoover Dam. The location of the proposed tailings lake is currently home to 30,000 Dolly Varden char, which would disappear through the construction of this project. Both Teagan and Treaty Creeks, tributaries to the Belle Irving River, and Sulphurets Creek, a tributary of the Unik River, support high fish values. These creeks and rivers provide critical spawning habitat and rearing habitat for large populations of salmon, trout, and other fish. The Belle Irving River and Teagan and Treaty Creeks support 25% of the Nass steelhead, 17% of Nass coho, and 8% of Nass chinook. As these lakes fill with metal-contaminated tailings water from the mine and the rock storage facilities, water would need to be treated and released into both Teagan and Treaty Creeks from the tailings lake and into Sulphurets Creek from the water storage lake. This release of metal-contaminated water would occur continuously over the 55-year life of the mine, as well as continuing for several hundred years after the mine ceases production. We assessed the modeling from Seabridge Gold, the proponent of the KSM mine, to determine the impacts to salmon and other fishes of the downstream waterways. According to the scientific literature, over the life of the mine, there would be several metals released into Teagan and Treaty Creeks from the tailings lake and several metals from the water storage facility into Sulphurets Creek. Metals released into these systems are in excess of levels known to have negative impacts on salmon and trout. Throughout the life of the mine, that is mine development, operation, and post-closure, there are 7 notable heavy metals to be released from tailings and water storage lake into salmon-bearing systems. All of these metals are at concentrations which are toxic to fish. Notably, there are 23 additional toxicants proposed to be released, yet there is little known about their effects on fish. The sublethal effects known to be caused by these 7 metals at the levels proposed include several negative behavioral and physiological effects. These factors are key to fish survival. The full extent of metal effects to fish through discharge into both Teagan and Treaty Creeks, as well as sulfurettes, are unknown, including the further downstream effects to the Belle Irving, Nass, and Unik rivers. Furthermore, the threat of a failure of the earthen dams on the tailings lake within the Nass watershed is of serious concern. The proposed tailings lake dams would be the largest in Canada. The type of dam proposed is also of concern. The proposed dams would use centerline construction as opposed to the more costly, yet most stable, downstream method. A dam failure could occur on either end of the tailings containment lakes, emptying the contents into either Teagan or Treaty Creek, with devastating consequences for both the Belle Irving and the Nass rivers for a very long time, likely wiping out their fisheries entirely. Liability for the cleanup of the proposed KSM project is also of grave concern. Seabridge has estimated that it will cost $132 million to close and reclaim the mine and plant sites, along with an additional $27 million annually to operate the tailings management facility. At minimum, the tailings management facility would need to be operated for 200 years, totaling $5.4 billion in cleanup costs. This estimate doesn't account for any maintenance of access roads, tailings lake dams, infrastructure, or otherwise. British Columbia requires a bond for these types of projects. The bond is required in case the operating company goes bankrupt and is unable to complete the cleanup. For the KSM project, it is estimated to be $400 million, but the amount won't be confirmed until the environmental assessment process is complete. Over the operation of the mine, the company would be required to pay into this $400 million bond as a percentage of production. If the operating company goes bankrupt at any point over the life of this project, regardless of whether the full bond has been collected or any value less than that, it is well short of the minimum required cleanup costs of $5.4 billion. The citizens of BC would be left to pay for the cleanup of KSM. To conclude, fish in Teagan and Treaty Creeks will undergo sublethal metal toxicity, reducing fish populations. Further research is required to predict the potential downstream flow of metals and other toxic substances into the Belle Irving, Nass, and Unik rivers, and their impact on fish communities. Compounding with these known impacts to fish from metal toxicity would be the looming threat of a devastating tailings dam failure, as well as the liability to the citizens of BC to pay for the cleanup of this risky project. Due to the proposed effects and risks to fish and wildlife, as well as the financial liability to the citizens of British Columbia, the risks associated with the proposed KSM project are exceedingly high.